So,
Hi, I'm David Riley, and
I'm Nicholas Harvey. I'm supposed to go first.
fine.
Welcome to Three Distinct Knocks. I'm Nicholas Harvey.
And I'm David Riley.
No, you already introduced yourself.
Yeah, well, you wanted to go first, so there you go.
Thank you.
Welcome to Three Distinct Knocks.
I'm Nicholas Harvey.
And I'm David Riley. This episode is about introductions. No, it's not. No. In point of fact, this is a unique episode in that one of our Patreons has actually taken us up on our offer to tell us what to do an episode on, which is a reward that we offer, and also a sneaky way for us to get out of doing work. So, because coming up with the topic sometimes is the hardest part. But
Yeah, if you missed the episode that we posted like 6 months ago.
it's a month ago.
A month ago.
Aaron Sherman of Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Brother Aaron Sherman.
Excellent. Aaron Sherman.
Excellent. He is an excellent person, by the way.
Yeah, I like that that in the York Rite you get to be an excellent companion.
I had to do something to get you to go.
Anyway, he writes, my topic is the ideal Grand Lodge, but in a bit of a science fiction context. It's 20 years in the future, and you find yourself in the new colony on Mars. At the point that there are 3 lodges in this new colony, so there's 4 Masons, so there's 3 lodges, you and your Grand Lodge decide that the time has come to form a fully autonomous Grand Lodge on Mars. And you are to become its first Grand Master, as well as having very nearly complete freedom in drafting its grand constitutions. What priorities would guide your shaping of this new Grand Lodge, and what would you do in creating that Grand Lodge that would differ from those that came before it? So that's a good topic.
Grand Lodge of Mars. Now,
Astronaut Nick.
Astronaut Riley. I mean, so, all right, so there's like 4 people on there. It's like you, me, somebody else, and then Elon Musk, because that's the only way we have it.
Yeah, which is how we afford having 3 lodges, because Elon Musk is bankrolling the Grand Lodge of Mars.
So Grand Lodge of Mars.
Whew. So the first thing that we have to think about is, what's the purpose of a Grand Lodge? Because I think one of the things that has become unclear as the innovation of 1717 has developed is that Grand Lodges have become unclear in what their role and purpose is. And so, like most bureaucracies, you give a bureaucracy power, it grows what it does, right? So let's have a really clearly defined mission for our Grand Lodge. What is it that a Grand Lodge is supposed to do?
We first have to say that this is in no particular talking about any current Grand Lodge,
right?
Lodge or other Masonic body. This is completely made up. We're on Mars, people.
Yeah, well, and in defense of current Grand Lodges the world over, my experiences with Grand Lodges have been by and large positive. I think there's a lot of really well-intentioned people trying to do the right thing, working for Grand Lodges.
Oh, yeah?
As staff for Grand Lodges and as officers, as Grand Masters. I may disagree with them, but I think they mean well.
Why haven't we had like a Grand Lodge of the United States?
Well, there's 2 versions of the story on that. Well, 3 versions of the story on that. The part that is without dispute is that prior to there being a United States, there were lodges in the U.S. And so when the country first formed, you may remember that instead of talking about, they thought of the United States as being plural. So they would say the United States of America are blah, 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 because they had this very strong identification with the individual states. And so it made sense to organize Freemasonry around the states because they were supposed to be the primary unit of the new world. The other thing that happened was there were lodges in those states. Those lodges knew each other, and so they were already kind of organized as Grand Lodges, just without the accoutrement And so they naturally gravitated to that system. There is a legend, and I really don't know. I've heard it repeatedly, and I've never bothered to find out how true it may be, that at one point they approached George Washington and said, "Would you be the General Grand Master of the United States?" And he said, "That sounds like a spectacularly bad idea." And he killed it. And so there's no Grand Lodge of the United States, because that's all we need is, another layer on top of the ones that already exist, to have to fund, to have to take care of, and then to add another layer of bureaucracy and regulation on top of what already exists. I think that was a good decision on Washington's part, if in fact he
did say that.
Yeah, he did say that. So I think that the first thing is to decide what a Grand Lodge is for. And I think the most important duty of a Grand Lodge, hearkening back to the reason they were formed in 1717, if you believe this legend of 1717, but whatever, is that they exist to help coordinate lodges. So to provide enough of a uniform system that the dues cards all look the same, so that we can tell what is a real dues card and what isn't a real dues card, to help keep a mailing list that's accurate, to perform these sort of administrative functions that are bigger than a lodge can handle, and to maintain a calendar so that when lodges are going to meet, so that you can go and visit.
Right.
Because back in the day, it could be challenging to go and visit a lodge, because your dues cards was issued by your secretary, who had his own way of doing it, and maybe when you walked into that lodge, they were like, "What is this?"
It says I'm a Mason.
Yeah, and then the rituals were very different from lodge to lodge, as they still are in the UK, but even more so. And so they, modes of recognition could be challenging as well, as we find when brothers from outside the United States come visit, or even sometimes from some of the states in the US, there's enough difference that we're like, what was that?
Yeah.
So administrative coordination is a legitimate purpose of a Grand Lodge. And I would love to see Grand Lodges provide, I love it when Grand Lodges provide resources to lodges that are helpful. And I know there's Massachusetts. So Massachusetts' Grand Constitutions contain a provision that says that floor work is at the discretion of the master. And the reason that exists is because they didn't want to have an argument. When Massachusetts reconciled the ancients and the moderns, they had enough trouble arguing about ritual, they didn't want to argue about floor work. And I like that because it allows every lodge to have its own little traditions and its own slightly different way of doing things. But when you go to a Massachusetts lodge, if you go to two different lodges and you watch them do the same degree, for the most part, the floor work is dictated by the degree, right? There's not a lot that you can do that's that different.
All right, so you're talking about changing like the little things, the stuff that doesn't really matter.
Well, no, all of it really matters, but every lodge can have its own little flair, its own little difference.
Are you saying we don't have to square our corners?
I'm saying if the master of your lodge says you don't have to square your corners, you don't have to square your corners. Preposterous. Yeah, no master will ever say that. No master will ever say
something so vile.
In fact, it's in the secret oath of a master. But I like that lodges should not be made to feel like they're franchisees of the Grand Lodge.
Yeah.
The lodge is the heart of Freemasonry, not the Grand Lodge. We had Freemasonry before there were Grand Lodges. We will have Freemasonry when there are no longer Grand Lodges. But you can't have Freemasonry without a lodge.
Right.
So the lodges should be respected, and the center of power in the fraternity should be the individual constituent subordinate lodges.
Okay.
Which brings us to who gets to vote at Grand Lodge.
Isn't that everybody's favorite part? Saying you have to go to a Grand Lodge to vote every year.
Right. So different Grand Lodges in the United States have made different decisions about who gets a vote at Grand Lodge. So for example, in Massachusetts, you get a vote if you are the master, senior warden, or junior warden of a lodge. And then lodges have proxies who vote if none of those people are there. You get a vote if you are an appointed officer of the Grand Lodge, including district deputy grand masters. and you get a vote if you're a permanent member of the Grand Lodge, which means you get a vote for the rest of your life.
Who's a permanent member?
Past Grand Masters, past Deputy Grand Masters, past Grand Senior Wardens, past Grand Junior Wardens.
What if somebody is district deputy and their worshipful master? Do they get 2 votes?
No, you get 1 vote per person, I think.
No.
But
absolutely not.
But their lodge gets their vote anyway because the proxy would cast their vote, or the next Monsignor officer.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So those votes actually belong to the lodges, and in fact, the Constitution specified that the lodge can direct their officers how to vote.
Say that again? What?
So the lodge can direct if there's an issue coming up, and the lodge has an opinion as a lodge on how their officers should vote. They can order their officers to vote a particular way.
Do the officers have to vote?
Yes.
Hmm.
Because it's
right?
it's the lodge's vote, right? So that's the Massachusetts way of who gets to vote. We got caught up in details, but in some jurisdictions, I believe Texas, for example, if you are a past master of a lodge, you get a vote at Grand Lodge for the rest of your life.
Okay. So we're just inviting anybody.
Yeah. So what that tends to do is to skew generally speaking, skew the demographic of who's voting at Grand Lodge.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Older
Right.
population. Right?
And new guys want to change something, they can't, because old McGee's going to sit there and live till he's 900 years old.
We hope, of course, sincerely that all our brothers enjoy good health.
No, not all of them. Not all of them.
So deciding who gets to vote at Grand Lodge is a big issue. My feeling is that I like the current officers getting a vote. The Grand Master gets enough weight by being able to give votes. All his appointed officers get votes.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So he gets to weight things in his favor a little bit that way. And the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, voting in the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts is for the most part a fairly pro forma affair.
Right.
I have been in Grand Lodge when there was an actual issue where actual votes were tabulated because it was close.
Right.
But I prefer that over saying all past masters get a vote because
I don't like that.
Yeah, I think you should have to have a current connection to what's going on.
So in our new the Grand Lodge of Mars, are people gonna have like fancy titles? Past astronaut.
Past astronaut. That's an interesting question because in some jurisdictions you get to keep if you serve honorably in the office, you get to keep the honorific for life. So if you're a past master and you get your past master's diploma and you did a good job, you're worshipful for the rest of your life, right?
Right.
And in some jurisdictions, when you're no longer a master of a lodge, you go back to being brother.
I like that.
Your brother, blah, blah, comma, past master.
I like that one a lot. That's Brother Edgar whatever.
Smith.
A real person.
A real person.
Brother Edgar from Masonic Revival. That's how he signs his email. Brother Edgar, whatever his last name is, comma, past master.
Right. So some jurisdictions do it that way. I also like the Scottish tradition doesn't have officers.
Doesn't have officers of what?
Of lodges or Grand Lodge. It's peculiar to the Scottish phrasing. They have office bearers, which makes it very clear that you aren't the office. You're just holding on to it for a little while.
Yeah.
And when you're out of that office, you go back to being who you were before.
Right.
You're just there for a little bit.
Yeah.
I kind of like that myself.
I like that. Simon Sinek has a story he tells about that, where bottom line is that it's not people respect your office, not necessarily you, and
right.
You have to respect the office as well.
So will our Grand Master be most worshipful? Because Grand Master of Pennsylvania is right worshipful. Grand Master of Massachusetts was originally right worshipful. So when people say most worshipful Paul Revere, he was never called that when he was alive.
Oh, fun
right
fact.
Worshipful. Yeah.
Fun fact.
But at some point that changed.
I think it should be
most worshipful. Just to fit in with everybody else.
We're on Mars. There's nobody else. There's 3 people.
Well, but we're going to have fraternal correspondence, doubtless,
Oh yeah.
with our less fortunate brethren still trapped on
Still trapped on Earth.
the hellscape that Earth has become.
I like the honorary. I like that when you're out of the office, it goes back.
Okay.
Because otherwise, that's like. Because that's one of the things I don't like about the lodge. Everybody, David, we're on the level. Except when we're in lodge, you call me by every damn title I've ever had in my life. I was DD in 1947. Tell me every time.
Yeah, well, and the problem is that the people who are most like that are the people who least deserve.
Who least deserve.
It's strange for me because when I became master of my lodge, and you can verify this with the guys in Amicable because they will. I'm sure many of them remember. It took almost my entire term of office for me to stop giggling when they called me worshipful. Because it just seems so weird.
I don't think the best Masons are the ones that you never know their titles. Like Bob Davis. What do you call? How do you address Bob Davis?
Dear and most illustrious brother Davis.
But you can't. He has so many titles, and if he introduces, that's the best part. When he introduces himself, he says, "Hey, I'm Bob." Or our.
But what the deal is that if you really earn the title, your brothers will call you that. Like if you did a good job as master, the members of your lodge, one way that they let you know that is that they consistently refer to you by title in formal circumstances. Now, mind you, the members of my lodge have referred to me by many things which were not worshipful, but on occasion. But and I have to say, for the most part, they were right. But it's a way that they show affection and respect and say thank you on a continuing basis. When I left the East, and I had this weird experience of still being called worshipful, and I'm not being master anymore. And guys, because it's habit, like, they're setting up the lodge, and they come to you, and they're like, "Should we do this?" And I'm like, "That would be a very good question to ask the master." And I swear to you, I had to say that 700 million times before, in the course of a month. It wasn't that long before they were like, "Oh yeah, Riley's not running things anymore." But it was a weird transition to suddenly not be the master of a lodge anymore. And I think one of the things that kept it weird was still being called worshipful.
Yeah.
I finally got used to being called worshipful, and then I became high priest of chapter, and they started calling me excellent, and that was even funnier.
Excellent. Because I like I don't even know if this is a true thing. I feel like if you're in office, I call you like WM, right? Worshipful master, you're in office. Once you're outside office, you're just worshipful. I don't know if that's like a real thing.
It's not a real thing, but that's okay. In the ritual in Massachusetts sometimes cuts it short and just addresses the worshipful master as worshipful. So even in the ritual, it's that way. Okay, so we've eliminated lifelong honorifics. We've decided who's going to vote in Grand Lodge. We've made floor work at the discretion of the master. What about ritual? Are we going to have just one ritual?
I was going to ask that. Are we going to allow do you think our ritual needs to be updated?
Do I think our ritual? Whose ritual?
It's like that meme where it's the guy's about to jump off the bridge and he says, "Are you Christian?" "Yeah, I'm Christian." "Are you Baptist?" "Oh, 1942, blah, blah, blah." "All right, you can go."
Yeah. John, heretic. No, I don't, actually. I think the ritual, one of the things that works for me with the ritual, there are things about the ritual I would adjust, but they're not really updates. In fact, they're going back. I would undo some of the changes that have been done. That, for example, removing, in those jurisdictions that have done it, removing the penalties from the obligations, I think is silly. I put them back in. But the thing that makes the ritual work in an odd way is that the language is so unfamiliar. You know you're getting ritual because the language becomes archaic.
Yeah.
And it becomes, and you have to struggle a little to stay with it. It requires your concentration.
I mean, like, because when I was doing my research project, from the years of like 1723 to 1730, holy hell, we put so many things in and took things out of it that we could see.
Yeah. We have to remember that for the majority of the period of time until ritual was really at the discretion of the delivering officer. So they'd be like, okay, you're the senior deacon, you're going to talk about these things, but you're just going to say what you think about those things.
Uh-huh.
And for the most part, you got what that guy was able to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was brilliant, and sometimes, you got what that average guy couldn't come up with that night.
Yeah.
William Preston came along and he wrote such beautiful stuff that people decided they liked it. And they wanted to deliver it just the way he did it.
Just the way.
And that's where the memorization came in. And you have jurisdictions. I know this is going to shock all our American listeners. So, American listeners, you might want to sit down. But there are jurisdictions where all ritual is read. They don't memorize. They read
That's
all
great.
of
That's
it.
like saying the whole Bible's read. Jesus didn't talk for all of it. You gonna tell me Jesus didn't talk in red ink?
I'm saying that there are jurisdictions where they don't memorize. They read it out of a book.
We probably caused a few car accidents. We're gonna be liable for this.
Well, that's the tradition out of a lot of the Grand Orient jurisdictions, because they want the officers to be concentrating on good delivery and not on memorization. And so they read it out of a book. And in fact, if you look at the setup of those lodge rooms, you'll notice most of the officers have desks in front of their station. And the desk is so that they can have the book sitting there. Yeah. And you're expected to be familiar enough with it that you can deliver it very well. But it's there so you don't have to worry about forgetting.
I just figured we're on Mars that maybe the guy could say, well, maybe we could have, oxygen tank. The oxygen tank is a tool used by astronauts.
That's an interesting point because there are some Earth-specific references in ritual. Would we update those to be Mars-specific?
I think we should at least allow we should allow it to be voted on, just like anything else.
Or we could have different versions of the ritual. We could have the red ritual for Mars, and then some lodges choose to practice the blue ritual for Earth.
Scotland does that. Scotland has, I think, 6 or 7 different.
Oh, the
rituals.
UK has a huge number of different rituals. Emulation rituals are just the most prevalent. But there's a West End ritual. There's a North of England ritual. I have a copy of one of the variant rituals. There's a lot of different authorized rituals in the UK. Louisiana has multiple rituals. Washington, D.C. has multiple rituals. Massachusetts has multiple rituals. In that we have English ritual, Portuguese ritual, and Spanish ritual.
Yeah, that one lodge. What's the one lodge where they do it in like 3 different languages?
I don't know what lodge they do in 3 different languages.
Yeah, the one they do in all the languages.
Loggia America does it in Spanish.
Oh, I thought it was 3 different languages.
Yeah, Loggia America does it in Spanish. The Independence does it in Portuguese.
Huh.
And most lodges do it in English. The Grand Lodge of Israel has lodges that work in English, Hebrew, and I'm not sure. I think there's a couple of other languages.
Interesting.
So, that in the case of Massachusetts, to the best of their ability, they've made it the same ritual.
Yeah.
It's just in a different language. But I would argue that, you can't, some of that doesn't translate. It's, you're reaching for a translation.
Right.
So, So I think it would be fine to have various rituals in the Grand Lodge.
Same story though, right?
But authorized versions.
Okay.
It's not just like do whatever the heck you want and call it Freemasonry. You can choose this ritual or this ritual or this ritual. And this is the trouble with the millennial generation. Something shiny flashes.
Something shiny flashes, and that's it. The whole world goes crazy.
So,
all right. So if we're on Mars, probably got people coming and going from Earth. Probably got a lot of busy things going on trying to make it happen. Are we going to allow one-day classes? Before you answer that one, be right back. One-day classes.
One-day classes. So I think the vast majority of people, like their knee-jerk response to one-day classes is no. I've read all the stuff the Grand Lodge has put out about one-day classes that says that a guy that joins a one-day class is no more and no less likely to remain an active member for 5 years than a guy who didn't. I've met guys who are active, informed, well-educated, dedicated Masons who joined in a one-day class.
Yeah.
I've met guys who went through the traditional system who can't tell you a thing about lodge. So, I don't think one-day classes. I don't think they're a good thing for the vast majority of people. I think if you don't have enough time to join a lodge in the traditional way, you probably aren't going to have enough time to be a member of the lodge anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the excuse is that, this lets busy men join Freemasonry. Well, it lets them join and then they never come to lodge, and a year later they slide out. So I don't think that's true. And I think the guys who are dedicated, who joined in a one-day class, would have joined the old school way. And
had they been able to?
Well, they just happened to wander into a one-day class, right?
Yeah.
So I would say overall, I think that joining the traditional way, having 1 degree at a time with time between the degrees for you to absorb them, I think the big advantage of that people don't think about is that it's 3 different opportunities where you're the focus of the lodge.
Who's the focus?
The candidate.
Yeah, but the one-day class usually has a ton of people.
Right. And that means that you're not the focus.
Right.
Even the candidates themselves aren't the focus.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's way too much other stuff going on.
Yeah. So I think I would say no one-day classes except for under special circumstances. For example, if what was it that you said earlier? A whole bunch of people were being inducted into Space Force.
Yeah, well, space. We do it military on Earth. The Space Force. The Space Force is the thing.
Yeah. If you're joining the Martian Defensive Forces, then maybe a one-day class.
Yeah.
Sailors used to try to become Master Masons before they would ship out, and then they would get a Masonic tattoo. And the reason was that they thought that if they washed overboard and they died and their body wasn't recovered, when their body washed up on land, if it did, they stood a chance of getting a decent burial from their brothers. So they would try to become Masons and get a Masonic tattoo. There was a push for that, which is how we ended up with some of the exemptions for time between degrees.
Okay, so that's back then. But now, let's say
you get lost in a space capsule.
Let's say somebody comes to your lodge and he's like, "Hey, I want to be a Mason. My father was a Mason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting shipped out in 2 weeks. I'm getting shipped out the week after your one-day class. I'm not going to be back for 8 years. Should we make him a Mason?"
I think that's a good question. And I think that should be left up to the individual lodges. Because I think it should be decided on a case-by-case basis.
Then if he's a Mason, should he pay dues?
Well, I think if he's a Mason, he should pay dues.
If he's in the Space Force, David?
Well, he's getting all that sweet Space Force money. Those Space Force guys make a lot of money.
Whose line is it anyway? Everything's made up and the points don't matter.
That is a difficult question. I mean, I do think that lodges should be inclined to generosity with their members. So if you have a guy who's actively deployed with the military and he's not making his dues, my response to that is that your lodge should remit the dues. Right up until the point where you feel like you're being taken advantage of. At which point,
you got guys in Iraq or something. Like,
right, exactly.
If then it gets into like, why is he a Mason? I don't know.
Well, he may be a Mason because he thought it was important and he wanted to do it to honor his father before he went to Iraq when he might die. And so he did it, and he plans on, if he lives, coming back and doing the right, being very active in his local lodge.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I'm not against it.
And maybe, we don't know, but maybe he's going to the lodge that's available on his base.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So, I'm inclined to be generous with guys when they're having trouble paying their dues, especially when the reason they're having trouble is obvious.
Yeah.
But that's the reason you need to have your dues be enough that you can cover those guys.
Yeah.
Without strangling the lodge.
I know a story of a lodge somewhere in the United States where one of the guys was going to go NPD, and somebody goes, "Is he in the military?" And nobody knew, and then they said, "Well, all right, we'll figure it out." So he figured out he's in the military, and this lodge was in a fairly red area, if you will. And boy, you get some patriotic guys right there. I think I heard something like they ended up raising like $1,000. They already said like, all right, he's not going to pay dues. You're right. It's
right.
Patriotic, absolutely. But people still wanted to like pay his dues and arrears. They ended up raising like $1,000 for this dude. No one's ever met him.
Well, and that's a good point. Is that lodges should be more willing to go to the members and say, "We have a brother who can't pay his dues. Can someone pay his dues for him?" I think that's perfectly legit. Too many lodges just act as if what we give in dues is all that we can possibly give a lodge, and that's not true.
Yeah.
Although they are also perfectly willing to take a lot of our time.
That's for darn sure. We should have a time. The Grand Lodge of Mars will have a time commitment. How many nights a month a brother can be out?
So Masons will have curfews?
Masonic curfews.
I'm sorry, Brother Nick, but you've been out 3 nights already.
We called.
You can't go to chapter.
We called Brother Bob. You weren't at his house. No. I was. What you guys talking about in lodge? I don't know.
I do think it's important that Grand Lodges not make things mandatory.
Grand Lodges not make what mandatory?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there's this tendency in Grand Lodges to so they come up with what they think is a good idea, a program to benefit the lodges, and then they put a lot of effort into it, and it is a good program, and they put it out there, but it's not what the guys who are the rank and file in the individual subordinate lodges are looking for. So nobody shows up to it. Or they show up to it the first time, and it's not what they were looking for, so the word goes around really quickly.
But it was just not.
Or they go to it, and it was really good. So the second time, a lot of guys show up to it. Then everyone who's interested is gone. But Grand Lodge is like, hey, we've got this great program. And they're offering it, 3 times a week, every week. And
at 10 a.m.
Yeah, well, no, it starts at 8 a.m., donuts at 7:30.
Donuts at 7:30. Registration at 6.
And suddenly nobody's showing up. And so the Grand Lodge says, well, but this is a great program. We're going to make it mandatory.
Right. They don't know that they want it.
Yeah, they don't. If they would just show up, they would find out how good it is. So they make it mandatory. And I have said repeatedly to various people, and I will say it again and again and again. Mandatory is just another word for you didn't make it good enough. People wanted to come.
That's true.
And so making those kinds of events mandatory represents a real failure on the part of the Grand Lodge. Because either they haven't communicated what it is that's good about this, or alternatively, there is nothing good about that to be communicated.
That's true.
So, yeah, I don't think that kind of stuff should be made mandatory.
Do you think lodges communicate enough?
I think that varies from lodge to lodge.
I mean, like from
in general,
like your lodge to my lodge.
Yeah, I think in general lodges don't communicate well with their members. We send out the monthly notice, which has just the bare minimum that you have to have in it.
Got to fit the trifold, man. If it's not in the trifold, it didn't make it.
And we do a poor job of finding other ways to communicate. I am beginning to see changes in that as lodges become more adept with technology. I know there's at least a couple of Grand Lodges that have bought phone tree systems that their subordinate lodges can use. So you can record a message and it will call every single guy. I know Grand Lodges are starting to run mailing lists for subordinate lodges so that they can easily email all their members without having lots of mistakes or spam vulnerability. I know there's lodges are becoming savvier with websites.
You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. And I know there's a few lodges that have started using smartphone apps with push information.
Group Ahead is an app that you invite the people you want, and there's a chat function, there's like a files function that has everybody's phone numbers, it has a calendar. We used it in Massachusetts in my mother lodge, but the problem was that, and I was actually talking to Brian Godwin about this because he's implementing it at his new lodge. Congratulations. His lodge just got chartered.
Anchor Bell.
Number 868 or something.
Yeah, I'm a Massachusetts Mason. I don't know numbers.
We don't know numbers. That's cute. Pound sign. You can't use the pound sign. I don't know. But
numbers, we don't need no stinking numbers.
Yeah, wherever that's from. I don't know, I just matched the voice. Yeah, but they use Group Ahead. That worked fairly well, except what ended up happening was everybody gets notified for every single thing.
Right.
So if you guys are talking about, did you get the beer? Yeah, I got the beer. What kind of beer did you get? Can you get me this beer? That's like, ba-ding, 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 ba-ding. And you're like, no. So everybody silenced it. Right. This is what I was telling Brian. Everybody silenced it. So what's the point of the app? Because you never open it. Because everyone's like, I'm going to open it once a day. You don't open it once a day. So then we switched to a private Facebook group, and that worked very well because even if you silence all the notifications, a guy's going to log into Facebook at least once a day, and he'll see that there's stuff going on.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different approaches to communication, and I think it depends, on how old your guys are, with the mix of ages, with the mix of where you are, and what it is that you need to, how active your lodge is in between meetings, that kind of stuff. One thing that I started doing, I wasn't as consistent with it as I would have liked, and I didn't do it for long enough that it stuck. But I had a brilliant idea, which was, as secretary, I sent out an email saying, if you have an announcement, please send it to me in advance, and I will print it and hand it out to people.
That's a pretty good idea.
So that you didn't have 50 minutes of lodge time being taken up with people standing up and saying their announcement. And guys didn't have to run around trying to remember what the dates were.
And then they take out their phones and, what was the date?
Yeah, exactly. Because it was all handed out and printed out. And that worked really well. I was pleased with that.
I think that's a good idea.
Who's going to elect the Grand Master? The voting members of Grand Lodge? Are you going to have a nominating committee?
No. I don't believe in nominating committees. Because they're all each other's friends. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want...
Yeah, but then if you...
Like, put it this way. I would want the Democrats to make the Republican nominee, because if the Republican nominee wins and he's terrible, it's in the country goes to crap. It's the Democrats' fault. I just thought of that. I might be completely wrong.
You do understand that the Democrats would nominate the weakest Republican so they could still win.
Okay, well, without that loophole, but you get what I'm trying to say. But like, they're all just gonna all vote for their friends.
Well, that depends on how you select your nominating committee.
Oh, yeah, I don't trust that either. Because
So you just want people to stand up on the floor of Grand Lodge and say, "I nominate so and so."
we can have a digital. It didn't go well in a certain state. I think we should every member should have a vote.
Every member of Grand Lodge.
Every member, what? Every
voting member of the Grand Lodge.
No, every Mason who's in good standing should be able to vote
For Grandmaster.
Yeah, like we vote for president. Democracy.
That's a lot of work.
Why?
How are they going to vote?
I don't know. Hand it into the. I don't know, man. That's why you're going to be the first Grandmaster. I'm on the side. I'm just the guy that said told you this wasn't going to work.
Brother Nicholas, I'm appointing you chair of the elections committee.
But no, I don't even know if any Grand Lodges even do this. But it happens. But it's like, oh, we're going to make so and so. We're going to give the friend thing. Yeah, here you go. And then he's in it. Oh, and then he's like, oh, because he came from him. I think the Masons in good standing of a lodge should elect everybody. District deputy up to maybe not everybody. District deputy and grandmaster.
District deputies aren't representatives of the lodges, though. District deputies, I mean, if you look at the language of what a district deputy is meant to do, the district deputy is the personal representative of the Grand Master to those lodges. It's not the other way around.
Oh.
And the reason that is because the Grand Master who invented district deputies, by the way, he was from Massachusetts. You're welcome.
Wait, is that a real thing?
Yeah.
When was that?
I don't remember exactly. But the whole point was he realized that during his term, he wasn't going to be able to visit every lodge.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, well, I'll have a district deputy Grand Master, and it will be his job to visit every lodge in his district on my behalf.
Huh.
And that was the whole point of it.
Well, we also have a Massachusetts guy to thank for commandery. So, I mean, you take the...
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. Massachusetts.
Webb, Rhode Island. He was living in Rhode Island.
Still a past master of Massachusetts.
Yep. I'm standing on the technicality.
Fine. Do you think there should be a district deputy brother? A person who represents all the brothers to the Grandmaster.
Oh. I think really that should be the job of the Worshipful Master of Lodges.
Yeah, okay. Let's get serious, though.
Well, it's interesting because when I was in DeMolay, district deputies were elected by the past master councilor. Every jurisdiction in DeMolay is set up differently, and Lord knows if they still do it this way because it was 700 million years ago. But the district deputies were elected by the past master councilors of the chapters in that district.
Well, that's a big difference when you actually put it on. All right.
So they got together, and it was usually a dance, and they pulled the.
Sorry, was it a real dance or a figurative dance?
No, a real dance, like
so a whole bunch of little
at a district social event.
Okay.
They would pull all the past master counselors together, and they would say, "All right, choose the district deputy," and everyone would go, and then there would be one guy who was sort of the guy everyone looked up to.
It's the guy,
and he'd be like, "All right, I think so and so. I nominate so and so," and people would go,
I trust him. That's right. You trust him. I think there should be a district deputy brother, a guy who represents all the Masons. That's what happened. I mean, maybe it's just me. Maybe I just feel that way. I think it's a bit authoritarian.
It is. Freemasonry is a little bit hierarchical and authoritarian.
It's crazy the things I'm finding out tonight.
The other thing, Freemasonry also gives its individual members a heck of a lot of power. You can keep a guy out of your lodge, just you.
Fun fact: I learned tonight you cannot tell an honorary member of a lodge that they're not allowed
in
Florida.
In Florida. Yeah, I think that's true in Massachusetts too. I know in Massachusetts you can kick out anyone who's a visitor if even one. In fact, you must ask them to leave if even one member of the lodge requests
No, really, even one guy.
Yep. The only exceptions to that are district deputies in their suites,
Yeah.
and the Grand Master in his suite.
Do you have to tell why? I think that's the big thing. Well, what if you have a guy that's like, I don't like him because he's black, you know? Wow. No, nothing a few Masonic funerals can't fix.
Well, I support that provision because you're supposed to have harmony in a lodge.
Oh, yeah.
And if a guy is visiting and he's causing disharmony.
Oh, it's only a visitor. That's right. It's only a visitor.
It's only a visitor. Okay. You can vote against anyone as well.
You can vote against anyone as well.
Becoming a member of your lodge.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Well, those are things that we've worked into the Grand Constitutions. What else? Funny titles. You think Freemasonry has funny titles, Nick?
I didn't write that.
Illustrious Harvey.
I am. I am. Anyway, we talked about it. We already talked about that. We talked about. I don't want it. Your brother, man. It's like probably the only thing I like about Commandery is Sir David Riley, comma whatever you want.
Sir Knight.
Sir Knight, David Riley, and whatever you want after that. Yeah, because you're just a normal guy. Because it's confusing, especially if you're a new guy coming to visit a lodge, and you're like, "That's the worshipful master," and the new guy's like, "I'm sorry, what?" And he's not going to ask to that. He's going to be respectful and be like, "Okay," and then he's going to go home and be like, "I'm sorry, they worship that guy." Because nobody does a good job of explaining, like, oh, hey.
Yeah, well, that's the reason you need to have a Masonic educator in your lodge.
Boom. Are we going to allow advertising?
Of course.
Okay.
Here's the argument. Lodges have, for a very long time, advertised. We've just sort of lied about it. I mean, what do you think all those parades were that they used to hold?
Yeah,
that's advertising.
That was advertising.
That was advertising back in the day. They used to buy ads in newspapers. They would run an ad that would say, Joe Smith Lodge, number 446, had the Duke of York in attendance at its meeting on June 5th. I think the prohibition against asking someone to be a Mason is pointless at this point. We should maintain that idea that a man has to become a Mason of his own free will and accord.
Yeah.
We shouldn't pressure people to be Masons.
Right.
We shouldn't even really encourage it. We should offer them the opportunity, and if they take it, great. If they don't, then maybe
you can't offer them the opportunity more than twice.
Yeah, I don't want to say that because.
Well, after that, it's like, hey, do you want to become a Mason? Hey, did you want to become a Mason?
Yeah.
Because then it's like an MLM thing. You know what I mean? At that point.
Yeah. Catechism.
One of the biggest. I was never good at taking tests in school. I knew the work. If teachers sat me down and says, "Look, you're terrible at tests, but I know you know the work, so talk to me about whatever." And I could talk to them, and they'd be like, "You obviously understand this. Give me a test. I'm terrible." I don't believe that because someone spent 2 weeks or a month or 2 weeks or 6 weeks or 6 months learning 50 Q&As that they're like, "Oh my gosh, this guy's great." I think we should make it. We should test them in a way that we know they know the work, and it's not just because anybody could recite some words, and we have that in lodge sometimes. We have officers that are like, "Hey," and they just repeat the ritual, and there's like, they don't even know what they're saying. Because if you're like, "What does that even mean?" They're like, "I don't know."
Yeah, I think there's a place for some level of memorization in the candidate experience. It's a little bit of it's a tradition. It's the modes of recognition are. It's good to have those memorized, but I think we should accommodate guys. I've worked with guys when I was doing candidate education. Massachusetts has a cipher, and it doesn't work for you very well, evidently, if you're dyslexic.
No.
And for the obvious reason. And so I worked with a candidate who was dyslexic and really struggled with it. And I finally was like, okay, we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. It's called mouth to ear. My mouth, your ear.
Sit down and shut up.
I'm going to repeat this until you hear it when you sleep. And,
Follow him home, whispering in his ear.
Exactly.
He gets into bed, you're like in his ear, still whispering.
And it worked. He got it. He did a great job. I think you can work with people. And I think the amount that you ask of them should be geared carefully to be enough that it requires work, but not so much that it's overwhelming for anyone.
Yeah.
I also think that there should be more than just memorization that's a part of candidate education. The catechism is, to use a brilliant phrase, is necessary but not sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
So they should have a good understanding of the catechism. They should have a good understanding, especially of their obligations, and especially the little twisty, tricky points of the obligation that might not be immediately obvious to a new guy.
Yeah.
But they need more education than that. They should be educated on protocol and etiquette. They should be educated on their lodge's history. They should be educated on the history of their Grand Lodge. They should be educated on the origins, both real and mythological, of Freemasonry. They should be educated on the difference between allegory and fact. They should be educated on the basic philosophy of Freemasonry. They should be educated on the place of Freemasonry in the history of the Enlightenment movement in America and Europe. Those are things that they should begin to know about. I don't say they have to have, a perfect education in any of that, but they should begin to have an understanding of how Freemasonry fits into the world.
Yeah.
By the time they are raised Master Masons, you have this great opportunity to sit them down and spend time with them. To spend all that time simply memorizing seems a waste.
And on that note, do you think would you have lodges open on less than the third degree?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, well, why not? Oh, the third degree thing, that all opening on only the third degree, doing business only on the third degree, that all started as a result of the Morgan exposure. It was an attempt to keep people from pretending to be Masons, and it didn't work.
Okay, can't hear the bills unless you're a third degree. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. That said, I also think lodges should be, it's not the place of a Grand Lodge to do anything other than encourage this, because it's not something you really can legislate. But lodges should be encouraged to do things other than degree work and routine business. Have educational nights, have social nights, have good programming for every meeting. If you're going to lodge for the purpose of hearing the budget, no.
Yeah.
It is bad.
But that goes back to our first point of time commitment. Don't schedule 15 things in 1 month, man. We have lives. We have families. We have things going on.
Some of us have lives and some of us don't.
That's true.
But I agree with you. I think it's important for individual bodies to also remember that a guy who's really committed and involved in lodge likely is also committed and involved somewhere else. In Freemasonry or outside Freemasonry. Because, what's the old saying? If you want something done, find a busy person to ask to do it. Because they'll actually get it done.
Okay.
The person who's not busy at all never does anything. So they're not going to get it done.
That's
right?
true.
So a guy who's deeply involved in your lodge is probably also deeply involved in a couple of other things. And you need to be respectful of that. We can't make good men better and make our communities better by doing that. If we take the good men we're making better out of the community.
Yeah.
And monopolize all their time. So I agree with you. I think that's a good point. I love Freemasonry and I love being deeply involved. I like going to, on the worst day, I would be grumpy about having to go to lodge because I just wanted to go home and go to bed or whatever. And I would get to lodge and I would see that first guy and it would just all slide away. And I would be thrilled to be there again. I love going to candidate education, spending time with candidates. I love going to, and even I would get irritated with some of the excessive demands placed on officers in particular. For example, in Massachusetts, district deputies make 2 visits to every lodge in their district a year. A fraternal visit where they just show up to say hi, and an official visit, which is really the world's most complicated bill collecting ceremony. And
That's true.
and the master and wardens of all the lodges in the district are really strongly encouraged to attend the district deputy on both of those events. Well, let's say you have a district with 7 lodges.
Okay.
That's 12 meetings a year. 12 more times a year that you're out.
Right. That he's out, that he's missing family. That's not with the other commitments he has,
Right. You're taking the master away from his lodge.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that it's a nice tradition because it gets guys to go visit other lodges and see other lodges and get to know the guys in other lodges. It has a place, but I think it's too much. It would be nice if they did it, if you went to all the lodges over the course of a year 1 time instead of 2 times. Maybe. I don't know.
Or just have a district event. That'd be cool.
Have a district event, yeah.
Get all the lodges together one night.
But you never get to see a lodge unless you see it. Like if you visit their lodge, you get a totally different impression of how it is and how it runs and who those guys are when you see them working their thing in their lodge.
That's true.
I do think there is some value in that. I just think it's asking a lot. Then you pile on top of that, they want all the officers to go to monthly lodge instruction.
Yep.
And then you pile on top of that they want to have 2 district meetings, and then or a district meeting after every quarterly, whatever. And then you pile on top of that, and it starts really adding up. And I don't think anyone's sitting down and saying, wait, how many nights was that?
Yeah. That's what we did.
And we are, whether or not you like it, we are volunteers. In the end, a guy can walk away, and some do because they feel overwhelmed.
All the time. All these past masters leave the East. They're exhausted, man. They're like, look, that took 7 years out of me. I need a break. And then they realize that it's kind of nice to be home.
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
Well, it also happens that, guys have given up career opportunity.
Yeah.
And so by the time they get out of the East, they need to concentrate on something for themselves.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I think we've solved all the problems.
Man, I mean, I feel like if, we start doing this on Mars, they might ask us to come back to Earth and solve all these problems.
They're going to be like, we do not recognize those Mars guys. They are irregular.
Yeah, we're not getting invited.
Yeah. When UGLE has its 300th anniversary, we will not be there.
We will not be. Our invite got lost in space.
Yeah, lost in space.
Lost in space.
Danger, Will Robinson. All right, Aaron, I hope we did justice to your topic.
Yeah, and we want to hear. We'll be posting this on our Facebook page.
Yeah, what would you do if you were the Grandmaster of Mars?
And seriously, though, the Grandmaster does have a hard job. I mean, but I also think that's another thing. I don't think I know. I wish, all the Republicans are going to hate me. I wish we had weekly addresses like we had for Obama. When Obama had weekly addresses on YouTube, I would love to hear from our Grandmaster every week. What's going on in our fraternity? What's, happening around the state?
I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is how much unhappy news ends up on the Grandmaster's desk.
Yeah.
And how much that influences their view on things. And I think that's sad. So, in the end, I do think we should be not just respectful of our grandmasters, but charitable towards them as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. Probably.
I'm always right.
Oh, you're doing great. You're gonna be a great officer in our.
In the Grand Lodge of Mars.
Yeah. Wait, hold on. I gotta fix this. Oh, I think they're a pop out.
Right there.
All right. You got it, Grandpa?
Oh, you want me to do it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that concludes the Grand Lodge of Mars. The fantastic photography on our website is courtesy of our Patreon and the guy who appointed us Grand Master of Mars, Brother Aaron Sherman. Excellent, Aaron Sherman. Our theme song was composed by Worshipful Christopher Duggan. And this time, Nicholas will remember to include it. Our website is maintained, curated, and lovingly tended by Brother Nicholas Harvey. We are grateful to our Patreon sponsors.
Who is really growing.
Charles Ward, Bill Stutner, Adam Roth, Amicable Lodge, Jacob Savick.
Congratulations on your marriage.
Congratulations, Arthur, Patrick Harvey, Christopher Patty, Masonic Revival, Fossil Bluff. You can use code 3DK for 20% off at Fossil Bluff. Aaron Sherman and Robert Patterson, who I think is the guy from Twilight. I didn't even know he was a Mason.
I don't know how I feel about a vampire being. Was he a vampire or werewolf? He was a vampire.
Yeah.
Why do we know this?
But he was a vampire who sparkled in sunlight.
Let's just close this.
He had to be a good guy. To become a Patreon sponsor, visit our website at 3distinctknocks.org, where you will find additional episodes and other content. Essential canine supervision for this episode was provided by Falula and Zach. Yeah. And essential female supervision was provided by Jessica.
Hey.
The opinions expressed in this podcast and on our website are those of the individual contributors and do not represent the opinions of any lodge, Grand Lodge, or other Masonic body other than the Grand Lodge of Mars.
We represent the Grand Lodge of Mars.
That's a great line. That should be our new slogan for 3DK. We represent the Grand Lodge of Mars. If you notice that we've upgraded, I'm David Riley, and I'm incredibly thankful for the brothers that have made this podcast and my Masonic journey so rich, interesting, challenging, and fulfilling. I hope 3 Distinct Knocks has helped you make some daily progress in Freemasonry. Thank you for listening.